What happens when the man you trust most quietly decides the world is better without you? Would you notice the signs? Would you confront him risking everything? Or would you smile, play along, and wait for the perfect moment to expose it all? This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's about a woman who saw the lie, survived the setup, and turned the final toast into a reckoning. Her name is Charlotte Avery, and on the night of her 20th wedding anniversary, she handed someone else the drink meant to erase her. You'll want to hear how this ends. The jazz was soft, barely brushing the air like a secret candlelight flickered against the glass panels of the terrace, overlooking the quiet stretch of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It should have been romantic. Our 20th anniversary. Guests smiled, murmured, compliments, held flutes of champagne. And right in the middle of it, I saw him do it. My husband, Dr. Bennett Avery, leaned ever so slightly to his right. His fingers dipped beneath the white linen-draped table and emerged with something small, silver, a vial, just a second, no more. Then he reached for the glass. To anyone else it would have looked like he was adjusting his cufflink, maybe brushing dust off the table, but I'd been watching too long, too closely to miss it. He slipped a few clear drops into the stemmed cocktail glass, the one meant for me. He didn't know I saw. That was his mistake. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. My hands stayed perfectly still on the table, but my heart began to tick like a countdown clock. There, standing beside him, was Alexa Monroe, the woman he once described as a former intern, a bright young pharmaceutical rep who happened to be in town. Her dress shimmered green, her smile practiced Charlotte. She greeted me earlier with a kiss on the cheek that lingered just a moment too long. It's so good to finally meet you. Now, as Bennett turned to hand me the glass with a warm smile, I returned it just as sweetly. Oh, I said, tilting my head. I think this one's yours. I lifted the second flute, my untouched one, and gently switched them. Mine's the one with the thinner stem. I'm picky like that. She laughed. Of course she did. And she took the glass. I lifted mine, nodded to the room, and sipped the Comsley. Drink meant for her, light, effervescent, harmless. I don't know what was supposed to happen that night, but I know this much. Bennett thought he had control. He thought I would smile, toast our anniversary, and vanish before dessert. But tonight, someone was going to taste betrayal, and it wasn't going to be me. People always said Bennett and I were the kind of couple that looked like a magazine cover. We met at UNC Chapel Hill. He was in his last year of med school. I was finishing a master's in finance. He was charming in a quiet, steady way. I was drawn to that calm. It made me feel safe. We dated for 3 years before he proposed. Nothing dramatic, just the two of us on a hike near Looking Glass Falls, eating sandwiches from a cooler. He pulled out a ring and said, "Let's build something real." And I believed him. More than that, I built my life around that belief. By the time I was 30, I had given up a tenure-track position to help Bennett open his own cosmetic surgery practice in downtown Asheville. I handled everything behind the scenes: leases, payroll insurance, client scheduling, tax filings. No one ever saw me in the lobby, but every smooth system was something I'd touched. When our son Jude was born, I didn't hesitate. I stepped even further back. No more spreadsheets, no more conference calls, just preschool pickups and piano lessons. Jude's laugh, Bennett's praise, our home in the woods, it all felt worth it. For years we had a rhythm: lazy Sundays making cinnamon rolls, family hikes, movie nights with Jude curled up between us. Our friends called us the glue couple, you know, the kind that holds everything and everyone else together, and I wore that title like armor. If I ever felt tired or unseen, I told myself, "You have everything you wanted. Be grateful." But then the rhythm changed. It started small. Bennett began coming home late, saying surgeries ran long or post-op patients needed follow-ups. I didn't think much of it. He was ambitious, dedicated. I'd always admired that about him. Then I noticed his scent. Not his usual cedar and soap cologne. This was different, sweet, sharp, like gardenia, with something synthetic beneath it. Once I found a receipt from a boutique perfume store. in Nashville tucked into his gym bag. He said it was for a client gift. A thank you for a big referral, he smiled. I smiled back, but my stomach had already dropped. There were more signs after that, quiet things. His phone started going everywhere with him, even into the bathroom. He changed the lock screen from a photo of Jude and me to a black background. Battery saver mode, he claimed. Conversations became shorter, duller, like we were passing each other in a hallway, not living together. I'd ask him about his day, and he'd say, "You wouldn't want to hear all that medical stuff that never used to stop him before." One night, I caught him standing outside in the backyard, phone pressed to his ear, whispering. When I stepped out, he startled and hung up. "Just the office," he said. "They messed up the post-op instructions," but he didn't sound annoyed. He sounded soft, like someone in love. Still, I convinced myself it was stress, or maybe a midlife shift. We'd been married nearly 2 decades after all. Maybe people changed in quiet ways, grew apart without meaning to. But deep down I knew. The hardest part wasn't the scent or the lies or the distance. It was the way he still kissed my forehead in the morning like nothing had changed, as if pretending made it true, and I went along with it out of fear, out of habit, maybe even out of hope. I remember standing in front of the mirror one morning brushing my hair when Jude walked in and said, "Why doesn't Dad come to piano recitals anymore?" I froze. My mouth opened and closed like a puppet's. I mumbled something about late surgeries, but the truth sat heavy in my throat. I realized then that the cracks in our marriage weren't just mine to carry, they were showing, and my son was starting to feel them too, but I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet, because I was still the woman who believed that if you gave everything, your time, your energy, your identity, then love would stay. The woman who thought trust was permanent. The woman who thought betrayal only happened to people who weren't paying attention. I thought I was safe, but I wasn't. And the woman I once was about to disappear. I don't know what finally tipped me over the edge. Maybe it was the lipstick stain I found on his coffee mug one Monday morning, dark red, not my shade. Maybe it was the folded spa receipt I found jammed inside the glove compartment, dated on a weekend he claimed to be speaking at a medical conference in Atlanta. Or maybe it was that text I was in the kitchen flipping pancakes for Jude before school, when Bennett's phone buzzed on the counter. Normally he kept it on silent or in his coat pocket, but that morning he'd left it out. He was upstairs shaving. The message blinked to life across the screen. "Let's make it her last celebration. Jai no name." Just that. The room went still, my fingers stopped mid-flip. The spatula hung in the air, trembling. I stared at the message like it might rearrange itself, become something benign. Some inside joke. Some reference I was too tired to understand, but it didn't. When Bennett came back down, I handed him his coffee and asked about the conference again. "Did they finally fix the AV issues in that hotel ballroom?" He blinked. "Oh yeah. Eventually." He sipped. "Why?" "No reason," I smiled. "Just wondering if it was worth it." That's when I knew. Not just suspected, knew. He was lying. And he wasn't even good at it anymore. I spent that week putting together a map. Not on paper, just in my mind. I cataloged every inconsistency. The perfume, the late hours, the new gym bag with nothing inside but a pressed shirt and a cologne, his sudden obsession with vitamin supplements. The moment he changed his phone passcode for cybersecurity reasons, I wasn't imagining things. I wasn't paranoid. I was being groomed to disappear. A few days later I found a name, Alexa Monroe, blonde, polished. Once worked as an intern at Bennett's clinic 2 years ago, left shortly after a policy dispute I hadn't known about. Now listed as a regional rep for a pharmaceutical brand based in Tennessee. She'd been tagging her location near Asheville on social media. Dinner photos. Cocktails. A rooftop brunch across from the spa on the receipt I found. Her profile picture was the same woman who smiled at me 2 weeks later at a business dinner and said, "I've heard so." Say much about you, Charlotte, and I'd smiled back like my life wasn't cracking beneath my feet. I kept digging. Inside our shared desktop computer, I found a folder titled Consultation Materials. Inside were receipts, PDF confirmations, one labeled Ridgeview Retreat. 2 guests' dates matched up exactly with Bennett's next out-of-town workshop. The guest fields Dr. Bennett, Avery, and Alexa Monroe. There were dosage guidelines, too. One PDF stood out: short, clinical, emotionless. Compound B, administer no more than 3 milliliters per beverage. Induces temporary confusion, fatigue, and cognitive slowing. Not traceable in standard blood tests. Recommended for supervised environments only. I remember reading it again and again, thinking there must be some mistake, some medical explanation, but there wasn't. Then came the image, a screenshot stored in his temp files, a message thread between him and someone labeled AM. You're sure she won't feel it? She'll be too dizzy to speak. It's safe. Just slows her down. What about Jude? I'll handle it. I don't remember breathing. I just remember the silence. The kind of silence that feels like drowning. It wasn't just infidelity anymore. It was intent. It was logistics. Planning, the kind of cold calculation you don't recover from. I sat alone at the kitchen table that night while Bennett took a call outside. I stared at the old family photos lined along the mantel. The one of Jude holding a sparkler in our backyard. The one of me and Bennett at the Grand Canyon with wind in our hair. Had he been planning it even then? Had I been sleeping beside someone who practiced how to erase me? That night, I dreamed I was falling through ice, clear, thin, breaking beneath my weight. But I didn't scream, I didn't flail. I just watched myself sink. In the morning, Bennett kissed my forehead and told me he loved me. I nodded and said, "You too," but inside I was gone, or maybe not gone, just sharpening. Because what he didn't know was that I'd already made copies of everything and I wasn't going to disappear, not quietly, not easily, not at all. That week, I became a woman I didn't recognize, a woman who laughed on cue, smiled in photos, and answered texts from her husband like nothing was wrong. I hugged Jude a little longer every night, knowing the version of life he trusted was slipping through my fingers. I was performing for Bennett, for Jude, for everyone, and no one saw the cracks. Each morning, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror and practiced my smile, not the big one I used to give Bennett when he walked through the door. No, this one was smaller, softer, measured. It had to look real without letting the grief underneath spill over. I wasn't grieving a person, I was grieving the version of my life I thought was true. One night, I stood by our bedroom window, lights off, watching Bennett in the driveway. He sat in the passenger seat of a black sedan. I couldn't see the driver's face, but I didn't need to. A flash of blonde hair caught the light. Alexa. They were parked just far enough from the house to think I wouldn't notice. She leaned across the center console, whispered something, and he laughed, relaxed. Easy? Then he reached over and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered, then he kissed her. It wasn't quick, it wasn't cautious. It was the kind of kiss you give when you think you've already won. I stood perfectly still, cold, numb. They drove off 10 minutes later. He came in through the back door, set his keys on the counter, and poured himself a drink. Long consult, he muttered. I nodded. You look tired. He smiled. Clients are exhausting lately. I poured myself water and took a sip so I wouldn't scream. He didn't notice. That same night, I opened my bedside drawer and pulled out a notebook I hadn't used in years. The kind with soft linen pages and a ribbon bookmark. I began writing. Dates, times, receipts, the wording from those emails. The name of the compound. Every small betrayal had to be recorded, not for a courtroom, not yet, but so I wouldn't forget who he really was when he tried to gaslight me back into silence. Because he would, and I couldn't afford to forget. The next day, I picked Jude up from school. He was unusually quiet in the car. I asked if everything was okay. He hesitated before saying, I heard Dad on the phone last night. He was talking to someone. He said, we can't wait forever. She needs to be out. of the picture. My hands froze on the steering wheel. I turned slowly toward him. "You must have misheard," I said gently. "Maybe it was something about a surgery case." He frowned. "Maybe. It just didn't sound like a work call." I kept my voice calm. "Let's not worry about it." "Okay." He nodded. But I knew he didn't believe me. I knew because I didn't believe myself. That evening, while Jude was in the shower and Bennett was out on another client dinner, I sat alone in the living room, phone in hand. I thought about calling the police, about showing up at the station with the emails, the pharmacy orders, the screenshots. But what would I say that I think my husband might poison me during our anniversary dinner? That he smiles too calmly and hugs too tightly. No evidence of physical violence. No confession. No fingerprints. Just subtle cruelty. And a growing file of proof that wouldn't make sense to anyone who didn't already know what kind of man Bennett was. A charming, successful surgeon with a beautiful wife and gifted child. Who would believe me? That was the worst part. Not the fear, the loneliness, knowing I'd be dismissed as paranoid or emotional or just another woman who couldn't handle her marriage. Falling apart, so I didn't go to the police. Not yet. Instead, I planned to survive the dinner, even if it meant sitting beside him with a smile so convincing it could pass for love, even if it meant pretending not to notice when he leaned too close to Alexa, even if it meant raising a glass in front of friends and family while silently praying I wouldn't collapse before dessert. He didn't know I'd found everything. He didn't know I'd copied every file. He didn't know the woman he was trying to erase had already begun writing her own ending. But I knew something now. I knew I couldn't stop him from trying, but I could control the moment he failed, and that moment was coming soon. By the time I reached the end of that journal, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to confront him, not with yelling, not with tears, and definitely not alone in our kitchen where no one could hear me scream. I had read too many stories where women didn't get a second chance. I wasn't going to be one of them. So I started building my own escape, quietly, precisely. First, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in over a year, Tessa Walsh, a divorce attorney I once helped during her firm's transition to paperless billing. She owed me a favor. When she picked up, her voice was warm. I didn't tell her everything. "Just enough I'm not filing," I said. "Not yet. But if something happens to me, I need you to have some files. Just in case." There was a pause. "Charlotte, what kind of files?" "Just a precaution," I replied. "I'll send them securely." That night, after Jude fell asleep, I opened my laptop and transferred everything onto a password-protected USB drive. I labeled it Tax Receipts, 2019, and tucked it in the bottom lining of my old clutch. Then I uploaded a duplicate to a private encrypted cloud and sent one copy to Tessa with instructions to only open if I failed to text her by midnight. On the 22nd, it wasn't paranoia anymore, it was insurance. The next step was more delicate. I needed visual proof. I reached out to a freelance AV technician, someone I found through an online forum for event surveillance and private security. I told him I wanted a discreet camera setup to catch a potential thief at an upcoming event. I didn't use names. I paid in cash. He installed 2 hidden cameras in centerpiece floral arrangements, one pointed directly at the head table. The anniversary dinner was being hosted at a luxury lodge just outside Asheville. Elegant, secluded, perfect for a celebration. Or a cover-up. The venue manager, a woman named Jillian, had no idea what was coming. I handed her a playlist, wine preferences, and a menu that Bennett and I had supposedly agreed on. Then, while she was distracted, I slipped behind the stage and into the sound booth. I removed the back panel of the speaker console and carefully placed the USB there, deep behind the wiring. It wouldn't be found by accident. That drive had everything. Emails, screenshots, audio recordings, pharmacy receipts, texts, even a video I'd captured of Bennett taking a vial from a drawer and tucking it into his blazer. You couldn't see what was inside, but you could see the label on the drawer, compound storage, Alexa M. It wasn't just damning, it was undeniable. Back at home, I rehearsed my expressions in the mirror. I practiced toasts, laughter, a slight tilt of the head when Bennett touched my waist. I needed to sell the illusion one last time. This time, I would be the one playing the part. 3 days before the dinner, I bought a gold satin dress. It wasn't my usual style, too bold, too showy. But he'd always liked me in gold. Makes you glow, he'd say. Fine, I'd glow. Right before I burned everything down that night, he kissed me goodnight like always, but I noticed something different. He checked his phone 3 times before falling asleep. Not once did he look at me. The next morning, I took Jude to school and made a mental note of who knew where I was. I left no room for missing person theories. I checked in with a neighbor, scheduled a coffee with a friend the day after the dinner, left a voicemail for my mother in Charleston just to say hi. I was laying breadcrumbs in case something went wrong, but more than anything, I was laying a trap. I knew Bennett was planning something during that dinner. Whether it was to drug me in public and claim exhaustion, or something more permanent, I couldn't say, but the intent was there. The arrogance was too strong, and the woman he thought he married, the one who folded laundry and managed the books and believed every word that passed through his perfect teeth, she was gone, replaced by someone colder, smarter, focused. 2 days before the event, I sat on the porch and watched the sunset with Jude. He was talking about his new music teacher, about how she let them play with synths and layer their own beats. I nodded and smiled. But I couldn't stop staring at him, his eyes so much like mine. He deserved a mother who fought back, even if it meant pretending for just a little longer, even if it meant letting the man who wanted to erase me think he'd won just long enough for the truth to hit harder. So when Bennett came home later that night, smiling, holding a bottle of red wine and saying, "Only 2 days. Babe, get ready for the surprise of a lifetime," I didn't flinch. I smiled right back and said I can't wait, because I wasn't afraid anymore. I was ready. The night of our anniversary dinner arrived, draped in expensive calm. The weather was clear, the lights at the lodge shimmered across the lake, guests pulled up in polished cars, stepping out in tailored suits and glittering heels. Every detail had been curated just as Bennett liked, and me, I looked like someone ready to be celebrated. The gold satin dress hugged my waist and caught every flicker of candlelight. I kept my hair down in loose curls, just like he used to request. A matching gold clutch hung from my wrist. Inside, it carried nothing more than lipstick, a mint tin, and a backup USB, just in case. Bennett greeted the guests at the entrance with a practiced warmth. To anyone else, he looked like a man in love. When he saw me, his eyes lingered, and for a second, I saw something flicker there. Not desire, not love, anticipation. "You look stunning," he said, brushing his lips against my cheek. "So do you," I replied, smiling tightly. "Perfect as always," he laughed. "Let's make this a night to remember." Oh, we would. As the evening unfolded, Bennett took center stage both figuratively and literally. He gave his usual performance, humble brags laced with gratitude, small jokes that made everyone feel like family, a toast to 20 years. He praised my patience, my strength, my unwavering support. People clinked glasses and smiled at me as if I were the luckiest woman alive, and I smiled back, because I had to. Across the room, Alexa sat near the bar in a deep emerald gown. She looked every bit the supportive +1, elegant, poised, forgettable to anyone not watching her as closely as I was. She didn't know that I'd already seen her name on a compound order. She didn't know that I had emails linking her to Bennett's private retreat booking. She didn't know that Tonight, the glass she'd raise would taste different. Dinner was served. Music played softly in the background. Our playlist guests passed compliments about the wine pairings and the stunning floral arrangements. No one suspected a thing. At around 830, Bennett reached across the table with a fresh flute of champagne. This one's chilled perfectly, he said, handing it to me with a wink. Your favorite. I took it in my hand. Heart steady, but I didn't drink. I looked over at Alexa. Oh, I said lightly, I think this one's yours. Mine's the one with the thinner stem. I'm picky. She laughed, without hesitation, and switched glasses with me. She didn't see the way Bennett's face twitched, just for a moment. But I did. I raised my glass and took a polite sip of what had always been mine, and she, with complete trust, raised hers and drank. The next 15 minutes passed in slow motion. Alexa laughed at something one of the guests said. She reached for a roll, but her hand fumbled slightly. She blinked once, then again. Her smile faltered. She grabbed the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. Is it warm in here? She asked. Voice thinner than before, Bennett turned sharply. What's wrong? I think I'm dizzy, she whispered. Eyes unfocused, her body slumped. Someone gasped. A server dropped a tray of glasses that exploded across the marble. I didn't move. Bennett shot out of his chair and caught Alexa before she collapsed completely. Call 911, he yelled. She needs help. Guests froze. Some reached for phones, others looked around in stunned silence. And I stood. I walked calmly toward the sound booth. The technician looked up from the control panel. Can you switch the screen input? I asked quietly. It nodded and turned the dial. Behind the stage, the large wall-mounted display flickered. The slideshow of smiling family photos disappeared. Then, a still image, Bennett and Alexa kissing in a hotel suite in Nashville. Next, an email confirmation of the spa weekend, listing both their names. Then the pharmacy message. Administer no more than 3 milliliters per beverage. Not detectable. Then, the crown jewel, a silent, clear video from the head table. Bennett leaning in. Bennett palming the vial. Bennett slipping something into the glass. Gasps. Real ones. The kind that come from people watching their reality tilt sideways. I turned back toward the room. Bennett's face was pale. I believe the police should be here any minute, I said. I made sure to send everything ahead. Murmurs turned to chaos. One woman burst into tears. A man stumbled back and dropped his wine. Alexa groaned from the floor. Now half conscious and sweating, Bennett rose to his feet. Hands in the air. This is insane. She's lying. She faked all of this. You ordered a drug under her name, I said. Would you like me to list the timestamps? That was when the sirens arrived. Blue and red lights danced across the windows as 2 officers entered Charlotte Avery. One asked. I nodded. That's me. Are you safe? I am now, I answered, handing him the second USB. Bennett tried to speak, but the officer cut him off. Sir, we need you to come with us. She's framing me, he snapped. Alexa must have had an allergy. She probably drank too much. You mean the glass you handed me? I asked calmly, because that wasn't mine. The officer looked at Bennett. Sir, we'll need you to come in for questioning. Bennett's composure cracked. He tried to walk away, maybe even run. But within seconds, another officer tackled him to the ground, cuffing him right there on the polished floor. The guests gasped again. Someone shouted, someone else whispered, "Oh my God." Through it all, I stood still. Not triumphant, just steady. Later, after Bennett had been dragged out and Alexa had been wheeled onto a stretcher, one of the officers looked at me. You handled this better than most trained professionals, he said quietly. I had 20 years to prepare, I answered, and it was true. They say when the truth comes out, it sets you free. But that night, walking through the now silent lodge, past overturned chairs and champagne flutes still half full, I didn't feel free, I just felt finished. The performance was over, the trap had sprung, and the man who once promised to protect me was now sitting in the back of a police cruiser, cuffed and silent, staring straight ahead, like none of it had happened. But it had. Alexa survived. The paramedics said her vitals stabilized within the hour. She was conscious enough to speak to the officers by midnight. I never asked what she said. I didn't. I need to. I had seen the look on her face as the screen played. Shock, betrayal, maybe even recognition that she had been used. Too, I didn't pity her, but I didn't hate her, either, not anymore. Later that night, I sat outside the lodge by the lake. The fairy lights still glowed in the trees. I could hear the soft ripple of water against the dock. It should have been peaceful, but I couldn't stop my hands from trembling. That's when I felt a shawl wrap gently over my shoulders. It was Rachel, my best friend from college. The only person I had ever truly trusted outside my family. "Noel's with my husband downstairs," she whispered. "He kept him busy the whole night. He didn't see any of it." I exhaled so deeply my chest hurt, not from fear but from relief, because that had been my greatest terror. Not the compound, not the public shame, not even the possibility of death. It was the thought that my son would watch his father unravel in front of a crowd. "He's okay," I whispered. Rachel squeezed my arm. "So are you." I wasn't sure if that was true, but I nodded anyway. The next few days passed in a blur of statements, lawyers, press inquiries, and silence. So much silence. Bennett refused to speak without legal counsel. Alexa, they said, was cooperating. The evidence was overwhelming. Bennett eventually took a plea deal, 4 felony counts, 5 years, no parole. He gave up the clinic, our shared accounts, and perhaps most ironically his image. The man everyone thought they knew no longer existed. Just a headline: Asheville surgeon accused in poison plot at anniversary dinner. I stopped reading after the 3rd article. Jude never asked for details. But one evening as I tucked him into bed, he looked up and said, "Thanks for staying." That sentence broke something in me, because he didn't say thanks for fighting or thanks for saving yourself. He said thanks for staying. He didn't mean at the dinner, he meant in his life. I held him for a long time that night, quietly letting the tears come, finally without needing to hide them behind a smile or a plan. We moved out of the house within 2 months. I sold what I could, donated the rest. We got a small place on the other side of town. I took a part-time position teaching finance at the community college. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Sometimes I paint in the evenings. I hadn't done that since college. I forgot how meditative it felt to make something with no agenda. Just color, brush, canvas. I see people from the old life sometimes. At the grocery store, in passing, some look away, others nod with soft, hesitant smiles like they want to say something but don't know how. Some admire me, some fear me, and honestly I understand both, because people want revenge stories to end with applause, but this one ends with quiet survival. No dramatic monologue, no fire. Just the long, slow process of rebuilding, of relearning how to feel safe in your own home, your own skin. I don't think I won. I think I escaped. And in the end, maybe that's enough. Because when someone you love turns into a threat, when they groom your death behind candlelight and toasts, winning doesn't look like triumph. It looks like still being here. So, if you're listening, if you've ever been in love with someone who slowly tried to erase you, I want you to know something. You don't owe them silence. You don't owe them the benefit of the doubt. And you sure as hell don't owe them your life. I stayed alive by acting. I stayed free by planning. I stayed whole by not going quietly. And when the moment came, I didn't blink, I didn't scream, I just handed them the truth and I let the world see. So now, let me ask you, if you had to choose between protecting the lie or exposing the truth, which would you pick? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of something buried or something brave, subscribe. Because sometimes the only way to end a nightmare is to narrate it.